Yeah, and actually, this is the first time I've done this seminar. I want to tell the story about how this came about. Um, but I've done a lot of seminars on dynamic facilitation and the wisdom council process around the world. This kind of began for me as when I started work at a company, Simpson Timber Company. They sent me to a seminar on a conference, and I went every year. And actually, I became a faculty member on the Creative Problem Solving Institute. And it always struck me that if human creativity exists, we should be able to solve impossible to solve problems, and we should be using it. Like, for instance, for our societal problems. We have big societal problems, climate change, all these things. But there's kind of this image that, oh, like for instance, the Serenity Prayer, if you remember that, it says, Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Maybe you remember better than I do too. The courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Well, what is this where we decide ahead of time that we can't change stuff? Doesn't that sort of cause a problem for you that we're just making our minds up and saying, oh, I can't do anything about that, so we'll just look everywhere else? And that seems to be the theme in a lot of how we operate. There's this sense of what's possible, what's not possible, so we're not going to do what's impossible. But now we're facing problems in society that are, everybody's saying, oh, it's too late, it's impossible, we can't do anything about it. Climate change or species extinction, etc. And so anyway, this has been a question for me, and I'm going to the Creative Problem Solving Institute, and I'm thinking, okay, here's how we're going to apply creativity to these problems. And it really didn't work out that way for me. I mean, I realized they really weren't doing that. They were doing creativity to make marketing problems simpler and to make more money and things like that was the main focus. So, but I got really interested in what is it? How does it that we do solve impossible to solve problems? Because if you look around, my guess is everything in your office or everything around you, every single thing around you was once an impossible to solve problem. Can't do it. You can't make a desk like that. You can't make a varnish like that. You can't make a lamp like that. You can't, everything. We progress through our lives solving impossible to solve problems. And seems to me that's what we have to do, is we have to turn and look at what is the quality of thinking to do that, and how do we release that quality? How does that quality of thinking get released, especially in governance and in our collective global situation, solving problems, and in our national situation? We have this paralysis in the United States anyway, and I think other places too, where it's just this fight. So how do we overcome that? And one of the things I want to share, I want us to recognize, is this word facilitation. And that's kind of the theme for this first session, is facilitation, if we get to. But the whole I'm really aware that when people talk about, for instance, climate change, for instance, and they tell you what they're doing, how they're going to go and demonstrate in the streets, or how they're going to talk to their legislators, or how they're going to stop recycle their garbage, or they're going to reduce their footprint, or we're going to get a tax, some kind of tax, whatever. It kind of boils down to top down and bottom up solutions. And facilitation is an entirely different approach. In other words, what is it that you and I can do to tweak things so that a system, a large system, like a national system or a global system or whatever, a company or a family, transforms itself? That's really what facilitation is about. It's about doing whatever's needed so that we spark this natural tendency of life to transform itself and to become bigger and better and change shape. That's how evolution works. So that's what, anyway, that's kind of a hint of how I see this working, is that you and I, if we get clever enough, if we understand the dynamics enough, we can facilitate whole system transformation at very large scale. I don't want us to focus on that right now. I want to have that kind of be the background, because what we're really doing is looking at 5 elements that I think of understanding, of wisdom, that I think prepare us so that we can really feel okay about looking at this powerful change possibility, our ability to really do that facilitation work, or at least, I mean, it would be nice to have elected leaders and everybody, moneyed interests and special interests and stuff sort of get it, that this is a possibility. And once people do, I think they support it. They want that. We all want to preserve planet Earth. Everybody, it's unanimous. It's not a problem getting everybody to agree. The problem is that our system is directing us, is facilitating us to go a different direction. We just have to change the facilitative code somewhere at in the software there, that we all get facilitated to preserve life and remember that we're all interconnected and with one another and other species, etc. So that's kind of what we're doing. And I'm going to try something here. David and I worked on it, but I'm not 100% sure. Oh, I was going to have you do something first. I wanted you to, I was telling my story. That's what I was doing. Sorry, I'm going to go back and tell my story. So I went to these conferences and I worked at the company. And when I came back from the conferences, I began to, on creative problem solving, I began to experiment with facilitation in helping the people at my workplace become in charge of their work. So I was working as a consultant in a timber company. And really, I had a laboratory. I didn't know it at the time, but it was called a sawmill. And my job was just to make it run better, make everything better. And I had a lot of leeway because I had a boss that reported outside of the organization. And so I was able to experiment with lots of different ways. And I talked management into gathering that I would have the ability to gather 2 teams of employees on day shift and a night shift. And I would facilitate them to work on their issues. And I told management that we would greatly improve productivity and quality. And they said, okay, Jim, we trust you, go ahead. So So I tried lots of different ways to do that using the skills that I developed and learned at the Creative Problem Solving Institute. And I really didn't. And I was also studying Jungian psychology, and I was reading Robert Pirsig, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And there were a lot of influences on me. Studying Jungian psychology, I guess I told you about that, but we went to seminars in the Guild for Psychological Studies and lots of stuff like that. And so I was trying to infuse what I was learning at the Creative Problem Solving Institute with this other material. And I began to realize that these employees would work, I would bring them together and I would say, you work on whatever you think is, whatever you care about most, and do not worry if it's impossible to solve. Do not worry if you can't do anything about this. It's okay, and we'll work on it anyway. And so that was my laboratory. And the employees would gather once a week for an hour, and they would pick issues that they didn't think they could do anything about. And within 6 months, every time they would be in some place where they would look back and think, oh, that was obvious what we did, or that just wasn't, that was ancient history when we thought it was impossible. That's, in other words, they didn't give themselves credit for solving impossible to solve problems. So I began to realize that this actually can work, and I had sort of developed a facilitation method. And when Jean and I moved to Port Townsend here, I started teaching seminars in this process that I had developed. And then later it ended up, I started going around to many cities around the world teaching the process. Dynamic facilitation is what it became. Well, anyway, there's lots of directions I can go, but in the seminars, so we would have a seminar and I would say, well, let's practice on some impossible to solve problems. Let's practice on something you care about, and we'll practice dynamic facilitation, then you'll be able to go into your workplace or whatever. And what people would choose often is societal problems. They would pick whatever, inner city crime or the healthcare system or education system or male-female relationships or whatever. And they would experience breakthroughs that were exhilarating to them at the time. And we'd have a little presentation at the end, where they had gone in their story of what had happened. But then they would go back into their lives and they really would probably, I don't know, think about it that much, but I ended up with this basket of breakthroughs that I'm sort of carrying around with me that, my God, this is incredible stuff. And all these breakthroughs seem to come together. And the coming together was often the same answer, no matter what the problem was. You choose the problem, and the answer would often come back to be the same one. And it would be basically that this problem of, accelerating debt or whatever, or crime or poverty is not caused by individuals. It's not caused by greedy CEOs. It's caused by the system. It's just a natural outcome of the system, of our system. And then it was like a big question. What is the system? What does that mean? I didn't know what that meant. And so I'm telling you a story of just following the trail along and there was a big set of insights around that there's really three dynamic systems, if you will. One is the triangle, the box, and the circle. We had the king, and we got rid of the king in 200 and some years ago, and we put a document there. We put a constitution. So our loyalty then changed from the king to this document. And this is like the rules of the game. So this became competition. I can't spell it back or upside down, but that's supposed to be competition. Maybe you can read that. I can't do it. But okay, so then there's a competitive system. Now this system is what we live in, and it's causing us immense, it's causing these problems that we have, so many. And I'm not going to spend time on it, but I just wanted to tell you that that was the insight. And then the question is, well, okay, how do we move to this third system where all of us are somehow, we're collaborative, we're working together, we're real people. It's really called democracy. How do we go to real democracy? What we really want is an action plan that could somehow shift that, be facilitated and shift that system from the box to the circle to go forward. And if that could happen, that would affect all problems. And it would affect maybe not all problems, but many, many problems. So that was the discovery. And then the question became, how could that happen? And I'm not going to go into it now, but that I think there's a not so hard way to do that. And that's what we want to, I want to take you through the elements of what I'm saying, essential wisdom, take you through the steps of that during this seminar so that we have a sense of how that can work. Why don't we have a brief breakout, 10 minutes, where you can introduce yourselves to a small group of 4. And then what I'd like you to do is grab one problem that you care about very deeply. What's your issue? And I'd like you to make a wish and share the wish in your small group. And then I'm going to present you a wish that I hope encompasses the wishes that you have, so that we can see how this systemic, how this really can affect the system. So that you and I have a way to accomplish that, what I call the monster wish, then we can start solving some of these monster problems that we have, these big impossible seeming problems. See if this works. What I want to do is I want to give you my wish and see where we are in my monster wish. And so see what you think of this monster wish, that all the people face the monster issues creatively together. Somehow we facilitate. This is for each system, for a national system or for a global system, that all the people face the monster issues creatively together and achieve breakthrough progress. Whatever those issues are, whatever the issues are that the people need, like for instance, whatever it might be, poverty, whatever, and where this new we the people conversation results in higher levels of awareness, understanding, and consciousness among all. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if this rings for you like it does for me, but it's somehow you and I can facilitate a whole system conversation, like a global conversation. I don't want to say you and I, but if that could be facilitated, that all of us could somehow be also, we have our normal systems, but we're also in this this conversation where we're creatively thinking together and achieving breakthrough progress, where the people provide wise leadership to governments. I guess I skipped over. And where this new we the people conversation results in higher levels of awareness, understanding, and consciousness among all. So I'm wanting to say that really covers the bases. And if the people could face whatever monster problem we've got, and there are lots of them, of course, I don't know how, let's see. Those which, like the monster issues and global monster issues, you know, the ecological crises, the wars, immigration, poverty, rise of authoritarianism, you name it. And if there could be a national conversation in the same way that we just talked about this, of where there's partisan gridlock, systemic racism, loss of privacy, you know, I'm thinking of AI and people, poverty, media silos, whatever issues there are, if we can have this monster, where if we could all face these issues together creatively and achieve breakthrough progress, so that we all came to unity. That's, if you achieve a breakthrough, you come to unity about what the answer is, where the people provide wise leadership to governments, and where this new we the people conversation results in higher level of awareness. So in other words, there's a transformative aspect to each individual as well. Most people think in terms of, gee, we need to transform the individuals, and then we'll have a collectively wise society. You know, if we can just educate everybody to learn about seventh generation or interbeing or whatever, then we can start having a wise society. And I'm saying, I don't think it works that way. I mean, it has to work that way. I mean, we do that for sure, but it isn't going to bring us the transformational results we want. But if you and I, but if we could facilitate, if somehow this conversation could happen where we're all working together and coming to shared understandings and coming to shared vision of what's going on, that would lead to individual transformations as well. So it's kind of an opposite approach. Does this make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So here, this is kind of the chart for the session, or for the seminar. And you don't need to pay attention to the action steps or the results right now. And I'm trying to say that we have this essential wisdom, we're going to work on the essential wisdom over the 5 sessions. And that leads to a set of action steps. And you don't need to pay attention to them yet, I don't think. But that monster wish, if you and I that can approximate achieving that monster wish, and if we can get that whole system, we the people, creative collaborative conversation going, then the results are unbelievable. Because then we've affected the whole system. We've affected the system. We've transformed the system. So, and I have those, but I'm not going to talk about the results or the action steps. What we want to do, just because we have such limited time today, is stay on the essential wisdom. Just talk about today's topic is facilitation, which we'll get to in a sec. This essential wisdom allows us to understand, oh my gosh, this could work. This could achieve that monster wish, and the results would be unbelievable. So the question, what does it mean to facilitate? What does facilitation actually mean? I mean, people use the word all the time. They talk about it all the time. We always say, oh, I'm going to facilitate a meeting. Oh, I'm going to, I'm going to act as a leader that's facilitative. What are they talking about? What does this mean?
Enabling folk to be heard.
Say again?
The virgin. Enabling all the folk to be heard, so you hear from all the quarters.
Yes. And to me, I'm going to go up a level or back or down a level or something, but to me, it's fundamentally about self-organizing change. There's 2 kinds of change in the world. There's managing change, this idea that we're going to be in control. We're going to control this. And of course, that's what government is about. Or we're out of control And then there's this whole other world of self-organizing change, somehow where the people all come together and they manage themselves. Now, where do we know that happening? Where does self-organizing change happen?
Rainbow camp.
Where?
Rainbow camp.
Yeah. Rainbow camp. I don't know where that is, but my answer is absolutely everywhere. It's only rare that we do manage change. Mm-hmm. Everything is evolving forward. Everything is working that way. Life does that. You go in the garden, you look at the trees, you look at me, you look at you. Whatever we do is basically this self-organizing change where somehow or other you do this magic and this stuff, this happens all by itself. That's kind of the way it works. I mean, somehow or other you and I got here. There was this big bang 14 billion years ago, and planets formed and suns formed and they died and whatever, and we got the ashes, and all of a sudden you and I are sitting here on a computer talking to one another. How did that happen? Did somebody plan that or do that or design that or whatever? I don't think so. Of course, that's what people thought of as God before, or even now maybe, is this designer that's working that way with change, in control, designing control, managing change, blah, blah, blah. But actually, life seems to go the other way. Life seems to be 99.9999999% self-organizing. But we hang out in a human situation that's pretty much managed change. Everybody thinks it's managed change. We have, the founders met in the United States, met 230 years ago. They designed a system and then they said goodbye. They all died. And you and I are in their design. We live in there. And they designed how we think, how we talk, how we make decisions, we make decisions different. They set up the process of thinking. And you and I hang out in there and we think that's human nature. So the question is, I believe for the facilitator, the nature of a facilitator in this world that's set up for this human world that's set up to be managed, the facilitator elicits, sustains, and enhances self-organizing change. They just help bring back that living bit into our lives, self-organizing, so that the group, if you're standing in front of a meeting, so that now the group is somehow doing it all by themselves. Now this is me talking, so I'm not very facilitative here, but when we do facilitation or dynamic facilitation, that's what we do. We dance around the edges, and somehow or other everybody's talking at a very high level. They're coming together as a whole. Any questions? Maybe I could just stop there and just see where you are with what I'm talking about.
In the chat, Maggie has a question.
Oh, Maggie, okay.
Hi, Jim. Yeah, the thing that is concerning me at this moment in time is the wild differentiation of power and money, and how the uneven positioning of people, so that it isn't egalitarian conversation. So those with more money and power get to control the system, whether it's a corporation, putting its will on the peasants, if you like, the sort of thing that goes on in India and Africa all the time. How does this address that kind of gross gap in power and money?
Well, That's a great question. You're getting ahead of the game, but let me give you a quick answer. That we can facilitate so that it's really just people. We know how to do that, and we're going to talk about that. But like you say, in society, it's not set up that way. In society, it's set up. And in my mind, what's happened with what I call the box system is that we replaced the leader with the rules of the game. And so we're playing Monopoly. And we've already determined who won the game. They already have Park Place and Boardwalk already sewn up. You and I were born into a system that has the rules of the game, and then there's this competition. And some amazing stuff happens when we get into competing. Because, I mean, I used to play a lot of basketball. And if my team got ahead by 20 points and somebody said, hey, you got to share your points. You know, this is like crazy. What are you doing? You know, and I'd say, what are you doing? We're playing basketball here. Go away. You know what I'm saying? We set up a game. We didn't set up a conversation. That is our system. Our system is this game, and the game has run its course. It's over. Can't do it anymore. And because we are now interdependent, the game depends on us being independent. We are interdependent. We can't do game anymore. The whole system cannot work. Cannot work. We will continue to have one problem after another. We will have many, many impossible to solve problems come along that are impossible to solve because we're only thinking within the game. If you and I can facilitate that larger thinking process, and it's just adding a conversation to what exists. If you and I can facilitate that new conversation, what I call choice creating, which we're going to talk about, and dynamic facilitation, if you and I could do that, then we're no longer the game. We've opened a hole in the game. We're now also, what really happens is we get it that that was a game. That wasn't real life. Now we're in real life. What do we want to do about these problems? Oh, well, let's start figuring things out. A whole world can transform. Now John mentioned, John McNamara mentioned that the mill. I was lucky to see that happen in a sawmill. I got to see that. I got to see management being hard-ass and punishing, and they call themselves a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest. And the employees became so empowered and interdependent and incorporating of the management. The employees incorporated management into their conversations, not the other way around. And the union, they reached out to the union, and in other words, the employees became empowered and became a we the people, if you will, providing responsible direction to the mill. And productivity and quality just went crazy.
Jim, Artie has a question about the facilitators' use of structure. So,
yeah, I feel like it might be facilitative, if I might use that word here, to bring in the idea of structure. In other words, we don't want to make it seem like everything's blind, that we're just diving into nowhere from nowhere, going wherever and so on. In other words, if you're in a group, there of course is going to be some structure. You know, if you have one person interrupting another person constantly or whatever. So, I mean, you look at sacred geometry and plants, there's a structure. You look at physics, there's a structure. And if you go out of that structure, you better go carefully and tiptoe. So that's anyway what I bring up here. What do you think of structure?
Well, there's a structure in the dynamic facilitation that we could talk about later, okay? And I think that would be interesting to you, is probably where your question really went. But let me say that the triangle, box, and circle is about structure. In other words, there's I think what happened is that there was a shift from the structure of the royalty, king, whatever, to the structure of the Constitution. And it really was a structural change. And that elicited an entirely different thinking approach, two major different thinking approaches. When you're into the loyalty world, you're into a hierarchy, you know your place, you know, you know your status. And when you're in the box world, it's creative in a sense. I call it fibda, your freedom inside the box determined by some authority. You know, you're competing, but there's a mentality that changes. But there's a structural change that happened at the bottom, just in the basis of things. And if you and I keep saying you and I shouldn't do that. If we somehow get this facilitative aspect set up, and it's just taking what exists, but it's adding a structural element. The structural element is that we really all in this conversation together. We're in life together, and we go back into the game once in a while. And we go back into the game. Well, maybe not 99% of the time, maybe we're in the game, but we're actually, the new structure is that we begin to realize, oh, real life is this conversation, not the game. And that realization is what we're after. And it's at the core is a structural change at the base.
May I say, Jim, that I remember you describing it in the seminar where the rules of the game doesn't go away, so that document is inside the circle, but now we've got a we the people, because that's the highest authority, and we can go in and out of the game, but we have an awareness that we are not the game.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. You know, and so to me, what we're talking about in the seminar, and we're almost done today, but is just understanding certain aspects of life, so that hopefully at the end of that, there's this realization that, my God, we can really do this. Or at least this really has a heart, this path really has heart. I mean, this has got something that could really we could make a difference.
I was sitting and listening and reflecting, and I'll be brief as I can, because it occurred to me that in order for any of these processes to change, and a big part of my present state is as a result of your seminar that I've attended twice now, it is that we have to be able to create an environment for people to feel safe enough to step into the conversation, because without that, I continue to be a dam in a way. I'm like this reservoir of potential for change, And I'm either going to hang on to it because I don't want anybody else to have it because it's mine, or I'm too afraid to share it because somebody's going to think I'm crazy, and I don't want that either. So the information never gets shared unless or until we create a space where people feel comfortable enough to come into the room and bare their souls and be weak or strong in the presence of others to create the vulnerability space that allows them to become more engaged and develop community. And I don't think that's easy. Vulnerability is not easy, I don't think, for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, I've come to the conclusion, and some of you I've talked with about this, that, you know, this is not just, dynamic facilitation is not for like facilitating a meeting, because you're sort of stuck helping people change into a different zone, and you make people become vulnerable if they go back into normal life. So it has to be part of an ongoing process that we're actually moving forward to a different kind of organizational system and structure and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's taken a long time, a lot of, for this lesson and others, but you know, to realize that this is not just facilitating a meeting. You can't do it that way. I mean, you can, but, and you get much better results, but there's a risk that people are left. Some people are sharing at a deeply vulnerable level, and we can't leave them that vulnerable. We have the best safety is that we're having a scheduled meeting in this high quality kind of conversation where we're facing we're facing real life, big impossible issues, and we're coming to collective conclusions.
Hey, Jim, can I say something? I think it's really cool that, Michael, that you brought up safety, because when we all went into lockdown a year ago, we wanted to try the experiment of doing dynamic facilitation online. And Jim was highly skeptical that we could do it, because the whole point of it is it works in high conflict situations best, but you have to keep people safe by intercepting energy being directed nasty at somebody else, for instance. And Jim didn't know if we could possibly do that online. And we have shown that we are able to do it. So the safety thing was absolutely key.
And Mark, you have a question.
Is the idea that if you have the right environment, all trust, you know, we get down to our very basic nature, that every problem has a single solution?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. A problem is two different things. One is kind of like you're going along great, and then something happens, and then you go back up, and then you know, it's kind of a difference between what should be happening and what is happening. That's one, and that's more the mechanistic kind of thing. But the other kind of problem is that if you have a feeling that an urgency for that to happen, it isn't enough to just have there be a difference between what is happening and what should be happening. You have to have this urgency that's a felt sense that it needs to get resolved. So one kind of answer solving the problem is when that sense of urgency goes away and you realize, oh, I don't really care about that anymore. I mean, that could be a way of solving the problem. Might not be. I mean, we tend to think of, you know, like algebra class where we went and solved the problem and looked in the back of the book and whatever. But when we're talking about impossible to solve problems that must be solved, like these monster problems, they're very complex, they're very big, and our feelings are very much in there too. So it's you know, it's about releasing people's potential and just getting happy surprises at all the progress that's happening, I think. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
All right,
Danny.
Jim. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.